Nation. We're
back. Welcome back to another episode of Fire the Cannon. I'm Rocky.
And I'm Megan, and we are Fire the Cannon.
I did it. Right on time and just one. Welcome back, Megan. Both of us are like kind of whatever because it was a long, good weekend. It was a good weekend.
It was. A lot of driving, a lot of miles on the road, but we are back in Austin, Texas. We're ready to roll. Ready to talk some Texas football, kind of look back on that win against Vanderbilt and look forward. Even though Texas has a bye week coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about what that bye week looks like, how it's important for Texas, what Texas might need to improve on as we go into that bye week and then look forward again to Florida right after that. So, yeah, welcome back, Rocky. You had we had a good time in Nashville. Now, listen, Smashville,
we did. Texas won the game and we won the party.
Absolutely. Listen, if there's one thing I know, it's that we always win at tailgating, and we're pretty good at partying and having a good time as well. So tell me, this wasn't your first time to Nashville, right? You've been to Nashville
I love Nashville. So I have a few favorite cities in the U.S. Seattle, San Diego, and Nashville are top for me, up with Austin, of course. I couldn't live in any of these cities for a lot of reasons, but I love being in them for long, good, fun weekends. Nashville, I was trying to explain to my friend, like Nashville's kind of like, here's Austin and here's Vegas. Nashville's kind of like leaning towards Vegas, the strip part, the
Broadway.
main Broadway. Yes. That part is like lights and, all the bars have to be owned by celebrities and country singers and this and that, like you can't just have Moe's Shack. It has to be, like we went to Miranda Lambert's place or Luke Bryan's place or so-and-so's place. Right. So it's more Vegas-y that way and everything's so lit up. And of course it was Halloween weekend. So we got to see a lot of fun costumes and stuff, people in fun costumes, and people were pretty creative and silly and having a good time. And so we were there Thursday and it started kind of slow because we were trying to get into Bluebird Cafe. And apparently you need to be in line like 3 days before the show to get in. So when we got there an hour before the show, it was already a long line and forget it. But we waited and gave it a shot and didn't get in. So then we went to the sports bar across the street. And Megan, they said that food was going to be hot.
Listen, I will say I'm proud of myself. I had hot chicken literally every single day we were there. I think I got a pretty good sampling. But yeah, look, the flavor. So we went to Corner Pub, great little spot. We wanted to catch some football. We had Thursday night football on. Of course, we were watching some of the college games that were on too. The Pitt game was on. And yeah, we looked on the menu and it says hot chicken, right? And even on the menu, it had a disclaimer. Hot is in the name. No refunds issued. I'm like, all right, off to a good start. That sounds like it's going to be
no refunds, like as if people are so used to sitting it back because it's so hot.
So hot, right? So I'm like, all right, that's off to a good start. You and I have a pretty good palate. We like hot food. We like things spicy. So ordered that, and I think it was consensus among the group. We had four people with us. It was consensus among the group. We tasted it and we're like, well, it's got good flavor, but I wouldn't even call this mild. I mean, it was nothing compared to hot. So, it's off to a little bit of a shaky start for Nashville's reputation on hot chicken, but picked up after that. We tried out Hattie B's, had a couple other places, and yeah, it was good. I mean, I love me some hot chicken. That it was really tasty. Something that I wasn't familiar with Nashville's game is pimento mac and cheese. I hadn't had that before.
Everything.
Yeah. I like pimento, but I hadn't had pimento mac and cheese before. So that being kind of a staple around the city was good too. So, you had to get your, does mac and cheese count as a vegetable in Nashville? Because I feel like I did not eat enough vegetables.
Side option everywhere, right? Well, here I'll show this. This was our, hold on, let me open it up.
This was the meal here that you were showing. Yeah.
This was our lunch here at
Hattie B's.
Hattie B's. It was so good. Hold on. Let me go back. I'll go back. Oh, there's the guy dancing. I'll get it in a second. I had it just open. Our lunch at Hattie B's was so good, and then it clicked away. Okay? So why is Twitter doing this now, where you
Been doing it.
watch a video and it doesn't even finish playing, and it clicks away to some rando ad? Like
Yeah,
I want to.
it'll auto play a new ad. Yeah, it's been a problem for a month or so now. It's totally
Yeah.
silly, totally silly. But yeah, anyway, so great food there. We had a great time. Caught the flea market early, which was pretty crazy. That was a
Here it
good
is.
time. All
Here's
right.
our good lunch. It was pretty amazing. The sandwich that we had, and we had whiskey lemonades. There's you looking all cute. It was pretty. And the place was packed with Longhorns at lunchtime, so that was pretty cool. We saw lots of Longhorns in town already by Thursday night and Friday morning, so that was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Again, shout out to Texas fans. We know, look, we know Texas travels. We saw it at Michigan, right? Where, once that stadium cleared out, it was evident that it was at least a third, at least 33% Longhorns there at Michigan. I would say it was a lot higher at Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt almost looked like Texas had crossed that 50% mark. That Texas fans were there, just
Oh,
really
I
filling
would
it
say it
out.
was at least a solid 50%, if not
Yeah,
more. Yeah.
yeah, I know folks think we exaggerate there, but Texas fans showed up, showed out as we always do. Uh, Going up to Vanderbilt again, Nashville, a great city. Lots, it's a fun destination to go to. A lot of fun to be had there. Uh, and Longhorns went in. Texas fans had a good time. Uh, Texas came out on top, 27-24. Got to ask you, Rocky, was that a little closer than you thought it was going to be? Little bit of a nail
Well,
biter
the
there.
spread was 18. Not that I said, not that I thought we would cover 18 on the road in an SEC game against a team with one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. But even within a couple minutes with the game, it should have been 37-17 with a few minutes left, with a couple minutes left, right? So Texas had so many opportunities to pull away and just make this a 15, 20 point game, 25-point game, but they just we'll talk about it. The penalties, the, shooting themselves in the foot, the turnovers, giving Vanderbilt short fields. We'll talk about all those things that, just like even Sark said in his press conference, it could have been 45-10 easily,
Yeah.
but Texas kept shooting themselves in the foot. They did just enough to survive and advance out of that. It was not at all a hostile environment, but it is on the road. And we know, like you mentioned, Texas being half the crowd, and the players, we'll show the players talking about, felt like a home field environment. But when our Alabama was there a few weeks ago, when Vanderbilt upset Alabama, you looked at the crowd and it was about 90% Alabama in that stadium, because they assumed, go on the road, but come home with a win. They did not. So Texas, yes, Texas traveled well. Less Vanderbilt fans sold their tickets outright. They actually wanted to be there. And but Texas came out with a W and a road win, a top 25 team. They were ranked.
Yep.
SEC, only 2 teams in the country have 3 or more top 25 wins, and that's Oregon and Texas. So can't sniff at that. So
Yeah.
it
Look,
worked out.
let's talk about the positive for sure. We heard for years and years the SEC is a grind. Every game you got to count it, you got to be happy about it, because the SEC, no matter who's in there, is a tough team. And so Texas coming off of a road win, it certainly sitting at 7-1 now. Texas is in a good place, bowl eligible, still fully in control of their own destiny. Walk away from that, Longhorn fans. At the end of the day, you're surviving advance. That's the name of the game, and Texas can still controls their destiny, right? They still are in the driver's seat of looking forward and what is to come. So a lot of positives to take from the game, but I will agree, we've got to talk about some of the ugly stuff. This wasn't the game that we anticipated from Texas. It was not a clean game at all. You mentioned this earlier. Texas was an 18-point favorite going into this game, despite Vanderbilt having that momentum of, starting to get that reputation of being the monster killers, right? They had that huge upset against number 1 Alabama at the time. They've been playing some really good ball. They've had some really, really close games, which you could argue next year, or just a few things go their way, and Vanderbilt's looking like a much better team than what their record shows. But all that being said, Texas went in, and like you mentioned, Rocky, in my opinion, despite what people want to talk about, there's the narrative that, oh, is there a problem with Quinn? What's going on with Texas? Is the O-line having an issue? Special teams, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But to me, at the end of the day, the story of this game was penalties. Like you brought up, Texas had 10 penalties for 108 yards. That to me is just a mind-boggling stat and is problematic for Texas. Sark mentioned this even in the presser. He said, look, 7 of the 10 penalties that Texas got on last Saturday had a direct impact on the game. And that is to say, Texas also in the past 2 games has had 18 penalties. We've got to clean that up. Texas, Sark emphasized the need for a cleaner game, for a more disciplined game, certainly on the offensive side. Look, towards the end of the game, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. Towards the end of the game, that big penalty by Vernon Broughton, who up until this point has had an incredible season. He's really stepped it up this year, playing a great game. But, just that lapse in judgment and that last play that he had before he got, again, kicked out for targeting. If without that targeting penalty against Broughton, this score likely ends up 34-17 at that point. Like, I don't think that's hyperbole to say. I don't think that's overreaching.
34-17 until they took it back.
Right. That's it. So Texas really hurting themselves early and often with penalties. Certainly the holding calls are something that we've got to get cleaned up. What are your thoughts? I mean, is this a fixable thing? Is this mental? Is Texas just getting beat up front to get those holding calls? What's the problem here?
All right. Well, first let's hear from Sark directly, because he addressed the penalties and where they're all coming from and how they're hurting the team.
Our crowd noise sometimes is louder in practice than it actually is in the game. And the variety of penalties was interesting. We had one false start. 2 of our holding penalties actually came from tight ends. It really wasn't the offensive line, and so I think it got kind of spread around enough to where it's hard to say it's just one group. Even in pass protection, I'd love to say it was just one group. It really wasn't. We had a running back issue in protection. We had some O-line issue in protections. We had an RPO that they defended well, where Quinn had to eat the ball and take a sack. So sometimes you look at numbers and it's easy to point to that group. The offensive line is kind of like the quarterback. When quarterback always gets too much praise when things go well and probably gets too much criticism when they don't. The offensive line isn't far behind, and so everybody's got to do their job better. Clearly, I think they know they can play better than they've played the last couple weeks. That's our job. Myself, Coach Flood, everybody involved, the leaders, Jake Majors, that group. We've got a veteran group, and they've got some good football ahead of them, and they'll get there.
All right. I am. It's easy to blame one group for the penalties, like the false starts, or, it feels like the defense overall is pretty clean on penalties. There was a defensive pass interference against Muhammad, and he plays an excellent game. He's one of, he grades really high all the time. But that was on a 4th down that gave them another first down, which led for them to get a touchdown. So that's the kind of thing where, Sark addressed it, that it was unfortunate that it was on the road, and the penalties were just everywhere, all kinds. One was ticky-tacky, calling Gunnar Helm on a, holding when it was just a good, clean, hard block. But at the end of the day, the penalties were the penalties, and they were impactful. And this wasn't, again, like we said, this wasn't a really hostile road environment. This was pretty friendly for the road. They have the 2 most hostile coming, right? They have Arkansas coming on the road, and then A&M. Both will be, fortunately for the Arkansas game, it's 11 a.m., so that may help a tiny bit, but it's going to be hostile. The Aggie game will probably be a night game. It's going to be hostile. If they have this many penalties, and then we'll talk about how many sacks they're giving up right now in a minute, but if they have this many penalties and many of them are self-inflicted in a pretty friendly environment, how is it going to be when it's hostile environment? That's what I hope that they're really working on over the bye week. What can they fix? We know Sark will fix it. We've talked about this before. When there's a problem, they get it addressed. Some take longer, some take an off season, but having a bye week to clean up self-inflicted things, even though we thought some of that would be cleaned up, that just seems like what's keeping them from being, when they started the season as one of the best red zone offenses in the country. And then this season, I mean, towards the end of the season, the last couple weeks, they're struggling more in the red zone, maybe because they're playing better competition, maybe because there's more on film against them now. Like, it's going to be Sark's job to keep adjusting.
Yeah, look, I think all of those things factor into it, but at the end of the day, this, to me, this is where we start to need to be paying attention, right? This is, I'm not in panic mode yet. I'm not worried yet.
Oh, no.
But like you said, I mean, up until this point, if there have been little issues in the game, they've been addressed the next week. But we're starting to see penalties become an issue that's playing into the game and having impactful moments on the game, truly impacting the score. So yes, do I have faith that Sark and co are going to address these things? Bye week's coming at a great time. I agree with that. But I am getting a little concerned that this isn't the first time that we've seen a game with penalties or Texas shooting themselves in the foot with sloppy play, right? This is bordering on a pattern at this point. We saw it against Georgia. We certainly saw it against Vanderbilt. And like you mentioned, we're going into play here. We're towards the tail end of the season now. Texas has got plenty on film, plenty, they've had plenty of snaps. They've played plenty of hours. At this point, I think that this is starting to be something. Look, if your head isn't in the game, if Texas is still making these silly mental mistakes, if we see this continue into the next game against Florida, I think the red flags need to go up. There needs to be concern. Am I freaking out now? No, I'm not hitting the panic button right now, but this is something that has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed quickly. Now, something that Sark said that I think is both good and bad, right? When a lot of folks want to point the finger at a certain group, we've heard the O-line. We've been critical of the O-line the past couple of games. They've made some mistakes. But this past game against Vanderbilt, the penalties themselves were spread out. Now, the holdings, the false starts, like you saw some of those concentrated on the O-line for sure. But as he mentioned, it was spread out. The tight ends got called for holding. We had a pass interference, things like that. So it was spread out a little bit more. So the good news is, it's not like we have one person, one group that's just absolutely bombing, right? But the bad news is, it's not just one group that has issues. So it's, you can see the glass half full, glass half empty on that, in that sense. There are a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. Certainly those holding penalties need to be adjusted. Of course, the now infamous pass interference call that was overturned, maybe because of bottles being thrown on the field. But all of these penalties are having huge impacts on the game, and ultimately at the end of the day, it's affecting the score, and it's affecting Texas's potential to win. So far, I mean, I would argue that even in the Georgia game, had things gone differently on a couple of plays, a couple of penalties that happened at key moments, Texas might be looking at a very different game, a very different score, and a very different season than what they're at right now. So, I'm not going to say it's time to panic. It's not time to freak out, but this is the week to fix shit. This is the week to get on it. This is the week that things have to improve. So let me ask you this, Rocky. Is this a case with this, Texas coming out on this win, 27-24, closer than we wanted? Is this a case of Vanderbilt being better than expected, or Texas regressing a little bit? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think Texas is regressing. I mean, there was still some really great play, and we'll talk about it. Players stepped up. There were players stepping up, getting their first starts or getting their first significant time, like, Jelani McDonald and Kobe Black and other players that really stepped up big time. DeAndre Moore getting more play with, Isaiah Bond resting this week. So I don't think it's an issue of Texas regressing. I think Vanderbilt is a legit team. Their 3 losses combined are by a total of like 1 possession. So, and they've beaten Alabama, which was ranked number 1 at the time. So they have played, not Alabama was ranked number 1 at the time. I'm saying, yes, Alabama was ranked number 1 when we beat them. Yeah. So they have talent. They are a competitive team. They did have more of a home environment than they did against Alabama, but it's still, I think it's still, the competition is good. There's NFL talent. They have an elite quarterback that was absolutely a playmaker. But when we're going into this game, we were saying, is he actually playing better than Quinn? Going into this game, he was. coming out of this game, Quinn played the better game. So graded higher, put up, helped his team put up more points, threw the ball down the field enough. So I think it's just better competition. It's on the road. It's still a win. The frustrating thing is that they did leave so many points on the board, and the turnovers and penalties gave Vanderbilt more than the score wasn't the game, right? But that was the game. They beat themselves up.
And look, let's talk about that. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, Texas came out on top, and we're going to take a win. A ranked win is a ranked win, and you take what you get in the SEC. But against different teams, like you mentioned earlier, Texas is about to go into some hostile games. We know that Florida coming up at home, of the games remaining, that should be the easiest. But Florida still has some weapons as well. But then right after that, Texas goes into Arkansas, which we know is going to be a miserably hostile environment. If Texas makes these mental mistakes, if Texas is making these giving these self-inflicted wounds against teams like Arkansas and a hard place to play like Fayetteville, Texas may not survive those games. They may not come out on top because, like you mentioned earlier, all of those teams are itching to take Texas down a peg, right? Certainly our old rivals want nothing more than to beat Texas and beat them soundly. So what Texas can't do is beat themselves. We can't beat ourselves in these silly penalties and things like that. So look, we know that penalties are an issue. We know that we've got to get those addressed. We've got to get them cleaned up. The holding penalties specifically have been problematic, and penalties in key parts of the game that have changed momentum, perhaps, change the field position battle, change things like that. We'll talk about that a little bit more here a little bit later. But you mentioned something earlier that I do want to bring up. The sacks have been an issue. Quinn Ewers, fairly or unfairly, was heavily criticized in this game for not throwing the long ball. Does Quinn still look like Quinn? We'll dive into that in a minute. But a stat that you brought up, I mean, Quinn Ewers was sacked 4 times in this game against Vanderbilt. Now, what do you attribute that to, Rocky? Is this a problem? Is this something where the O-line needs to improve on? Is this a fluke kind of thing? Did Vanderbilt throw enough at him?
I think Vanderbilt saw what Georgia did. Pressure, blitz. This isn't their style, but they went after it because that is an advantage. So we saw Georgia the week before get 7 sacks on Quinn. But I think the difference is this time Quinn took the sack, lived to play another get down, right? Didn't turn the ball over in the sacks, went to the ground, played again. And then, he had 17 consecutive, after that interception, 17 consecutive completions. And what we talked about going into this game was seeing him with more confidence stepping into the pocket. He did that for most of the game. That's what we needed to see. You can only take so many hits and fall to the ground before you do hold back a little bit. But what we wanted to see, we saw. I think some improvement in that area. There's still more to go to get back to the Quinn that was at Alabama, or the Quinn that was at Michigan, or the Quinn that was at the Big 12 championship. I wouldn't say he's that yet, but that's the playbook right now to control or manage or intimidate or whatever they want to plan to do against Quinn, is bring the blitz, bring the pressure. And then you see, because like Sark said, it's not all the offensive line. We saw the Jaden Blue running back miss a pickup or get confused on a pickup. So maybe it's just communication all along that needs to be improved, that can be improved in the off season. And they have the comforts of the home environment next week to work on that before they go into Arkansas. Yeah. So I think, yeah.
You mentioned it can be improved in the off season. I think you meant in the bye week, right?
The
communication.
The bye week.
Yeah. So I think here, I would agree with that. Look, I think there's a lot of things that are easy to clean up and things that can be improved with a week off. Mental, Sark mentioned this in his pressers. There are a couple guys that, some part of this is just the season's a grind, right? And that not just physically, we've got some guys that are a little bit banged up, but mentally as well. Sark mentioned, taking care of that mental health. Some of the guys on the team just need that reset button, kind of some days off to get their head right, get things back where they need to be in the game. And so again, that bye week's going to help, but I still, and again, maybe this is my UTSD creeping in on me here, but I worry that at this point in the season, we've only got a few more games left. Texas communication shouldn't be falling apart, shouldn't be getting worse at the end of the season. So hopefully that's something that the bye week they can kind of reconnect, figure it out. Because I agree. I mean, there were a few key plays where we would see a tight end or a running back miss a block. And you're right. There's enough film on the teams that Texas is going to play, but also on Texas now. People know that if you pressure, if you send the blitzes have been coming the past couple of games, and it's having an effect on how Texas is playing, how the offense is producing. So, of course, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Texas has to expect to see teams blitzing, putting that heavy pressure, trying to get to Quinn as much as they possibly can. And truly, the only way to pick that up, the only way to counter that is to pick up those blitzes, to make sure that Quinn stays clean in that pocket, make sure that uniform stays nice and clean, and that we're not picking him up off the ground so he can make some smart choices. Let's talk about Quinn's stats real quick, because again, this is another week where he took kind of a beating publicly. But I think this game, and Rocky, you chime in here if you think I'm off base here, but this game to me seemed like one where in the game, a lot of people had emotions about it and said, oh man, Quinn's not doing this. He's checking down too much. He's throwing too many short passes. But at the end of the day,
you take what the defense gives you.
Yeah.
That's what Sark said. If you want to go deeper, well, then play up more. Then we'll go over you. You're going to play back and throw in front of you. It's
right.
Taking what the defense is giving him.
Right. At the end of the day, let's look at Quinn's stats for the game. He was 27 of 37, so that's 73% completion for 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and an overall 154.3 quarterback rating. The numbers aren't terrible, right? Of course, the interceptions really, I think, are the glaring stat that folks are looking at. But I think in my opinion, at least in this game, maybe not as much in Georgia, but certainly in the Vanderbilt game, those interceptions weren't necessarily on Quinn. I don't think they were bad decisions. I know one of them for sure, and I think the other one too got tipped.
They were both batted, right?
Right. So to me, those aren't entirely on Quinn. Of course, you want to make sure that you're seeing the field properly, including the guys that are in your face, so that they don't get a big mitt up there on that ball. But at the end of the day, it's hard to have completions when somebody gets their hand on it. So I think this is one of those things where you look at his stats and you go, oh, well, that's, there's a lot to grow on here. There's a lot of positive to see here. Quinn managed the game well. And again, if you go back to reverse some of those penalties, take some of those penalties away, this game looks more like a 45 to 13 game, a 45 to 10 game, even 35-17 as it was literally on the scoreboard at one point. You feel a little bit better walking away with those larger margins of victory. And again, you can go back and see, oh, it was just a few key little things, to a little tweak here and there, and this game looks very different. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree. It's a bunch of little things, and I don't know if that's good or bad, that it's a bunch of little things. All right, let's talk about some of the positives, because there were a lot of positives in this game. You will come out with a top 25 road win in the SEC. That's a good thing. It doesn't feel like a massive victory, but it is a good thing, and the team still works hard and should still celebrate that win. One of the huge positives we know was, like we talked about, the Texas fan base really traveling, and the players even saying it felt like a home game. So here is Texas football showing you the crowd, burnt orange crowd. That's pretty good. The burnt orange crowd in the game. And then we saw even some of the players were saying that it felt like a home
game like that at the college level.
Yes, I have a couple of times, and I'm just saying, regardless of how many times I've seen it, there's nothing like it coming out, and I'm just wondering to myself, I'm like, dang, where's everybody at? And I'm like, it's like a home game almost. I was like, it just made the atmosphere way more exciting coming into a ranked matchup, and we knew Vanderbilt they were gonna bring their best. And just to have the support of Longhorn Nation it was awesome and amazing, and it helps us tremendously. Just to hear our crowd just going and Longhorns just shouting for us, there's nothing like it, honestly, in my opinion.
Oh, they're so happy. Even Sark mentioned the first thing he mentioned in his press conference. He always thanks the fans and the student section when he first gets there, but he really went on about how it was impressive to see so many Longhorns traveling, and Nashville. Like, this is fun going to other cities, and Nashville's a great city. People want to go to Nashville, but to fill up, like we talked about, at least half the stadium, and the players say it really feeds them and makes them feel, pumped to go play in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and again, I that's while you don't think that they're focusing on that in game, you know that it does, at least on the periphery, have some effect. You got to know that helps the mentality, helps the guys feel better about it. While we're talking about good things, let's focus back on Quinn too. We were talking about his stats a little bit earlier with that 73% completion rating. I thought there was another play in here that was really a smart heads up play by Quinn. It was that long ball, or that deep ball to DeAndre Moore that came out, and Moore actually said, "Look, Quinn changed the call on the fly. He read the defense well, and as Moore was running by in motion, Quinn changed the call." So that seemed to me like a really good heads up play by him, and maybe one of those things that most fans aren't picking up on or paying attention to. But that to me shows this high level and this high football IQ that Quinn's got, and might be some of those things that while we like to nitpick and while we like to fuss and think the sky is falling, our quarterback, we're in good hands. We're not in a bad situation with our quarterback.
Right. All right. So you mentioned DeAndre Moore. Let's go ahead and give him some love, because wow, what a story. We've talked about him before. We heard before the season him being one of the players that was the first one at the practice fields in the morning, and just really putting his head down and getting to work. Let's hear about Sark talking about DeAndre Moore and the development, and then we'll hear about Quinn talking about DeAndre Moore.
DeAndre did something that was very mature last season. I think he realized, okay, I'm not a frontline guy, and how do I learn from the guys that do it the right way? And he literally watched Jordan Whittington every day and has tried to emulate Jordan Whittington every day. And we all know how I feel, and everybody in our organization feels about Jay Witt and the leadership he provided, his willingness to do the dirty work. It wasn't about the stats ever for him. And DeAndre came into this season in spring ball, in summer, in training camp with that same mentality. And the credit I give him is early on in the year, I think he went 2 games without a catch. But he was starting in the same role that Jay Witt was playing, and never did he lose that leadership, lose that energy, willing to do the dirty work. And now he's had some games where he's really reaped the benefits of just staying positive, continuing to work. But I know this, he has got a ton of respect in that locker room from his peers about the work ethic, what he puts into it, the team player that he is, his willingness to play on special teams. And so I think everybody's happy and excited for him, but also I think he's earned that voice.
All right. And here's a quick one on Quinn on DeAndre.
We have a next play mentality. It starts in the summer with us and Longhorn shuttles. We know that things aren't always going to go in our favor. So what are we going to do? Are we going to lay down and, pour meat, or are we going to continue to move forward? And that's what we did.
Demo is one of those guys that is one of the hardest workers on the team, one of the smartest guys on the team. He leads that receiver room and helps those guys that are, struggling with plays. I mean, he's just that guy that anybody in that room can lean on, and it's cool to watch, because he was the one that was kind of in behind Jay Witt and understood, what that position meant, and I think he does a good job of filling that role.
Yeah, they know a lot of the work, especially Jay Witt. We talk about this all the time. The culture off and on that apparently DeAndre Moore is really becoming a leader on this team. But Jay Witt also had so much work off the ball or away from the ball that weren't on the stat sheet. And DeAndre Moore has been doing that. He's blocking downfield. He's, helping misdirect. He's doing all the things he needs to do, and he's being rewarded. Sark talked about him not having catches the first 2 games, but he stayed invested. He could have been one of those players, that transfers out or goes, starts in another school, even another Power 4 school he could be starting. But he's invested in his team, invested in his role, and he's being rewarded. 2 touchdowns on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think this is, we just like we were talking about a little bit earlier, check out the stats, look at these numbers. At the end of the day, they can tell a story. I think this is another case where stats aren't everything. right? So yes, pay attention to the stats. Can they make sense when you're looking at Quinn? Can it tell the story? Yes, they can. But this team and this culture is built so much around the guys showing up and what is happening away from the play. What is happening with the guys that don't have the ball? That to me has been a defining point of Texas football these past couple of years. Again, we talk about it with Roshan, with Rojo, right? With that attitude award and going out and doing whatever you need to do for the team. We constantly talk about it with Jay Witt, and we're seeing that culture carry on this year to this team in players like DeAndre Moore, where it's not necessarily about how many times you're going to touch the ball, how many catches do you have, what does your yardage look like. It's about what are you doing to help the team progress, what are you doing to help the team be better and be the best that they can be on any given play. And a lot of times that happens away from the ball. What are you doing when people aren't looking? Kind of thing. So, and I think that culture is really shining through with Texas and is going to help them get through. And like Sark said, look, you put in enough time, you have that mentality of team first, and really putting in those hard snaps, hard work, even when you're not the one getting the ball, and that will pay off. And we're starting to see that with DeAndre Moore, who had just an absolute monster game. So very cool for him. Again, one of his biggest games as a Texas Longhorn so far. So excited to see what's going on there. And you know, again, that next man up mentality, that what can I do for the team, has come into play for Texas. Let's talk about it a little bit. I don't want to linger too much on it, but the injury bug has been a part of the problem. Again, we're more than halfway through the season. We've seen some players that are a little banged up here. We saw Isaiah Bond, sit out this game. We talked early on about how deep this receiving core is at Texas, and thank goodness it is, because again, we've got a few injuries here, right? So Bond was out for the game, which Sark did mention, look, he could have gone in the Vanderbilt game, but we felt that it was better to give him that third week of rest, missing this week, and then of course having the bye week next week was going to be better for his ankle and recovery time. And given that Texas has so many weapons at wide receiver, it wasn't as risky of a call there. But something I don't know that a lot of people noticed either, Ryan Wingo got a little banged up. Sark admitted this pregame, actually, and you hate to see that. Injuries of course are a part of the game, but man, it sure sucks when it happens not during the game, during warmups, during something silly. But an early pregame collision between Ryan Wingo and one of the Vanderbilt staff had Wingo a little nicked up and a little beat up. So again, this bye week is at a good time for Texas. A little bit of time to recover, get healthy again. Are there any other injuries that you're looking forward or looking at and hope to see improve over this bye week, Rocky?
Well, I would just say the running backs getting healthier again. We need the depth. We know Wisner has been on and off with a little injury, but he still played really well. Led the team in rushing yards with 79 and got another 39 yards receiving. The issue, though, and we'll talk about this next week as we preview Florida, is Florida gives up the run, but Texas is really struggling to run the ball. Is it depth? Is it the formations? Is it the predictable, which is why they have to pass so much? We know Sark likes to pass, and then get a lead and then run the ball to finish the clock. They're not being able to do that right now. They're not running the ball late in the game. So we'll talk about that next week, about how leading into Florida, about what they're going to do with the run game to get that going. They're all amazing athletes with a fantastic offensive line. So what's the issue? We'll look at that, but I would just say getting the running backs. We saw, Velton Gardner came to Texas and we haven't been able to see him other than one game because he's been injured. So yeah, depth in the running back still is going to be the question all year long. Everyone else, I think, hopefully is back on the offensive side of the ball. Anything else you want to wrap about the offense before we give defense all the love?
Yeah, again, I want to point out a quick stat. And again, we'll dive into this more on our live show on Thursday. And again, as we preview next week, right before Florida. But this is courtesy of CJ Bogle. For the last 10 rushing attempts for the Texas offense versus Vanderbilt, this was the yardage gained on the last 10 rushing attempts. 4 yards, -1, 6 yards, 3 yards, 1 yard, 1 yard, -3, 23 yards, then 0 and 0. So I agree, Rocky. There is some question there. Again, we want to criticize Quinn, right, for those shorter passes. Why isn't he throwing the long ball? Oh my gosh, what's going on with Quinn? But at the end of the day, if you can't get your run game established and you are a one-dimensional program at that point.
Yeah.
You can't really put that on the quarterback. I appreciate that Quinn, given that we're not able to establish the run there, he's taking what the defenses are going to give him. So Texas fans, at the end of the day, it's not all doom and gloom when it comes to number 3. He's making smart choices in game. We saw a lot better decision making against Vanderbilt than we did against Georgia. So there's a lot to work on, no question. Texas has to be able to establish that run game. Again, like you mentioned, Rocky, we'll dive into that a little bit more on what Texas can do to get that run game going. But, in a game where Quinn Ewers was criticized heavily post-game, and I think unfairly post-game, let's look at all this stuff. Quinn, given the situation that he was in and given what the defense was giving him, I think he had a really good game. He made smart choices. He protected the ball for the most part when he could. Again, we just got to clean up some of that coverage, give him a deeper pocket, give him longer time in that pocket to make some of those longer throws if they're there. So on the up and up offense overall, how would you rank the offensive performance against Vanderbilt for Texas?
I mean, it could have been an A+, right? But the penalties, but they got enough points to win. So I'm going to go, because the penalties were so harmful, right? Self-inflicting. I would say a B.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
I'm so much out there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm right in that same area. I think B minus, maybe even. Again, I think Quinn, given what he was given, he made some smart choices. He did some things, little things to clean up. Offensive line could improve. Communication could improve. Running backs, we need more out of there. So that's why I'm not going to say, oh, this is an overall stellar performance. But like you said, got the job done. And when you really dive down and look at what opportunities were presented, I think that Quinn did a good job with what he was given. So, all right, let's jump into defense. Just take a look. Listen, your boy Mookie having himself a season. He's again, Michael Taft named SEC Co-Defensive Player of the Week one more time. Mookie's just stepping up and showing out. You had to be excited to see that.
We have been celebrating Mookie for a while. It's good to see that. Yeah. It's so good to see. He's one of the hardest hitters. He's one of the smartest players. He's playing above and beyond. He's so prepared. He's being rewarded now and celebrated for how much he contributes to this team. He had, the interception. He had the forced fumble, another good forced fumble. This tipped pass that he was able to, be in the right position at the right time. He had an amazing pass breakup on a third down in that prevented a touchdown in the end zone. They're just fantastic player, honored as co-SEC Defensive Player of the Week. He's one of the highest graded safeties in the SEC, one of the highest in college football. It's just hard to ignore what a season he's having. I know I had predicted him before the season to lead in interceptions. So he finally got one, but it's pretty fantastic just overall, like even off the stat sheets, but just a fantastic player. And especially when he had, he's been playing with Makuba, and this time it was Jelani McDonald starting with him. And wow, you would never know that this was Jelani McDonald's first start. Way to step up, the two of them. And then with Johnny Barron playing a little bit too back there, it was pretty amazing to see them all work together, and the communication that they have. I wish they could take that to the offensive side of the ball. Just fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there was a play, I don't know that we had showed it yet, but Westlake in full effect, right? Ethan Burke came up, batted the ball down, and then Mookie got the interception. So really nice play there. Yeah, look, hats off to Michael Taft. I think some folks kind of counted out. Pretty incredible story. Again, came on to Texas as a walk-on. He's a guy that believed in himself and bet on himself and really has put in the work, and it's, again, coming to fruition here. All that hard work is really paying off. So Michael Taft, honestly, I mean, I'm going to say this. I think he's moving himself up in the draft boards. He went from a guy that wasn't going to get sniffed at the NFL. And I think we may see by the end of this season, Michael Taft making a pretty solid argument for himself to be taken maybe later in that draft. So Yeah, let's talk about the players that stepped up. Again, we know that injury bug is kind of there for Texas, and we are missing some key players. But what we saw from Texas was, again, that next man up mentality with Jelani McDonald stepping up. Again, Jahdae Barron having a great game. Alfred Collins once again showing out. Let's talk about it a little bit. We see some of these players, the older players on the team with some of that senior leadership, really praising these young guys for coming in and stepping up and filling the role. I think we've got a clip of Benda and Taff praising the young guys. Can we pull that up?
Yep.
Man, Jelani, he had a game.
He's a stud. I mean, what an athlete, what a guy that comes in and is just like, man, that guy's going to be a monster not because of his athleticism, because of his effort.
He was all over the field, just coming down, laying the wood, but that's not surprising. He's been just a guy who's always been positive and working hard, and he does whatever it takes for us to win, and just to see him do what he does best, I'm not surprised, honestly.
So proud of that guy. He's a beast. He's so patient. When you watch everybody else get interceptions, watch Jahdae's interception last week, both of them. Watch Drew's interception last week. Go watch Jelani on the sideline and what he's doing. He could easily be in there. That could be his interception. That could be his spot. He wants to get one. He wants to have all the fame. But watch what he does, and that's why I'm so proud of him.
And I feel like that's a name y'all are going to hear moving forward from this point on, because he's a guy who always comes in willing to do the work, and he's just a monster. Y'all going to see it. I'm telling y'all now, y'all are going to see Jelani McDonald.
Y'all going to see Jelani McDonald. When it's coming from the senior leadership, that says a lot. So here, we'll put his stats up. 7 tackles, 4 defensive stops, 3 run stops, 3 run stuffs, an 87.1 tackling grade, 0 missed tackles. That's that on the road for his first start. What a way to step up. And that's from Hook'em Headlines. What a way to step up and fill a needed spot, because we talked about it. Ooh, is it going to be Jahdae that has to step in? We knew Jelani McDonald was starting. He had injury bug earlier, so we hadn't been able to see him fully healthy in the starting position. Wow. I'm so happy for him.
And I'd like to point out that 0 missed tackles stat. I think that's something that you look at it and you go, oh, damn, that's good. And some folks have the propensity to kind of move beyond that and maybe not give as much credit where it's due. I remember a time not long ago where Texas was known for trying to lay the wood and put big hits on, but not necessarily known for wrapping up and putting and getting the stop there, where there were teams breaking multiple tackle attempts. We would have to touch a guy 4, 5, 6 times to get him down on the ground. So 0 missed tackles to me is an indicator of just how much this defense has improved, how much it has changed, and really the direction that it's headed under PK. So shout out there. Not only are our guys ball hawks, they're where they need to be. They're in position much better this year than they have been in years past. Not only that, but they are attacking the ball and bringing their guy down. It's not just the jumping for it, going for an interception. It's not just trying to get that one big pop and hitting, but not wrapping up. It is clean tackling, smart tackling, getting them down on the ground and really stopping plays before more can develop after that. So I think that's a really important stat, something that's great to see and great to look at. So I also want to give a quick shout out for Texas, just players developing in general. Ant Hill now, again, that Jelani McDonald had a monster game, but Ant Hill through 8 games. Have you looked at these stats, Rocky? It's pretty impressive. He is now, through 8 games, he is now up to 58 tackles, 28 solo tackles, 5.5 sacks, and 10 tackles for a loss, including 1 interception. So again, seeing this Texas defense step up and be a leader in the nation for guys, and each player with, again, that next man up mentality on what can I do, how can I improve, what can I do for the team, I think is really, really, really impressive. And again, credit to PK here. I think I had some stats on here. Yeah. This is quite a turnaround for Texas defense. Let's just look at this real quick. Total defense. Again, I'll just give a few numbers. Since PK has taken over, the defense has turned around. Right now, Texas is ranked number 1 in total defense. Passing defense, they're ranked 3rd. Rushing defense, they're ranked 15th. Scoring defense, they're ranked number 2. First down defense, 5th. Third down defense, 8th. Red zone defense, 15th. So again, all things considered, especially looking at where Texas was but a few years ago, this is a huge turnaround for the defense. Texas is in a position that the defense is keeping them in the games. The defense, when the offense falters a little bit, when they're sputtering, like we talked about, maybe not producing what we expect or having some of those self-inflicted wounds, the defense is really stepping in and keeping Texas in the game, keeping them ahead of the game. What are you seeing on defense that you're loving?
I think they're even though the sack numbers aren't ridiculous or overwhelming, they are getting good pressure. They're forcing turnovers. We know going into this game, Michael Taff had mentioned after the game in the press conference that their goal was 4 turnovers in this game. 4. They got 4, 3, two interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a turnover on downs. But Vanderbilt only had 2 turnovers all year. All year, they only had 2. They are known for protecting the ball, controlling the ball, and not giving it up. Texas got 4 on the road. That's amazing. So the turnovers are coming, and I think they're doing their part to play complementary football, especially considering they are given short fields a lot of the time. Maybe they're giving up more touchdowns than they did earlier in the season. Again, better competition, and they're playing better competition now than they were earlier in the year. So, but overall, in this game, Pavia held him to 67 yards rushing. He's been their leading rusher on Vanderbilt by hundreds of yards. So to hold him to just 1 rushing touchdown and 67 yards when he tried to run it 16 times, that shows you they gave up that first one quick turnover. They gave up that first rushing touchdown. But after that, they recognized his speed, adjusted to his speed, and really held them. And it was impressive. They're a total package team. They can, like you said, and I'm surprised too, because as much as we feel like people are running the ball on Texas, they're still a top 15 rushing defense.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
They're not run. It feels sometimes like, they're giving up the run, but they're really not.
Yeah, look, I think that's a very important thing to point out. We can be nitpicky all day long, and we can have feelings because we expect Texas to be absolute perfection on every single down. So we walk away from some of these games going, man, we're stinking it up here against the run. We're stinking it up here and there. But when you really look at it, at the end of the day, we're not. Texas is an elite defense and doing really well against folks that are up against them. Like you mentioned, Pavia said, this is probably one of the best defenses that I've gone against. He said they weren't giving me anything. They were stacking up against the box. What was his exact quote? I'm searching for it here, but he said they've got a really good defensive line, probably the best that I've faced. He mentioned that this is Pavia speaking again. We had to roll in the pass game because they stuffed the box. So to that point, Rocky, I mean, they contained Pavia for the most part. They stuffed it up. They stopped the run. They really forced him to throw the ball. And I think that's part of where we saw those turnovers happen. They took him out of his game, made him uncomfortable, made them more one-dimensional, and then that forced those turnovers. Again, I don't want that stat lost on this game. 4 turnovers from the Texas defense, forcing 4 turnovers against a team that had only had 2 all freaking season. Come on, man. Like that's huge. That's a great job by Texas and the PK crew for really stepping up and putting pressure on a team that had taken care of the ball really well up until this point.
Right. And I know we saw fantastic play from the senior leaders like Benda and Barron, Taff, right? But we have to give some shout out to the future of Texas and the development that's happening. We saw Kobe Black, true freshman, get in there. He had the pick 6 that was returned because of the Vernon Broughton, late targeting hit. But let's show that clip real quick of Kobe Black also had an amazing pass breakup. And LaFau, we got to show LaFau.
They will run it on 4th and 2. Pavia backpedaling, and he lobs it downfield for another Texas takeaway.
Another Texas takeaway. It's so exciting to see the young guys being developed and getting opportunity to play. And, it helps recruiting too when you're saying, hey, well, if you're good, if you're ready and you're prepared and you're, physically ready to go, we will play you, right? Kobe Black got significant game time. He was in there by before the halftime he was in there. And I was like, Kobe Black is in, and
Yeah.
turned to
We
you and said,
noticed
he's in, and he played so well.
he
LaFau,
did.
we know, it's been developing all year, getting better and better, and plays really well next to Anthony Hill. It's so exciting to see the young guys play well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and again, to me, this is a complete unit. The defense is playing really well together. As much as we question the offense sometimes, like, oh, the communication could be a little better. There's just little things here and there that they're just not quite clicking on yet. The defense is not having that problem. The defense is communicating well. They're seeing plays. They're in position where they need to be, and they're really ball hawking. They're paying attention, staying home when they need to, pressuring when they need to, getting after the ball when they need to. So absolutely, just a huge effort by the defense, and shout out to them. Again, if it wasn't for the improved Texas defense, we would be having a very different conversation about the season this year. Texas,
Absolutely.
When the offense has kind of faltered there, which is interesting because that was kind of a flip flop of last year, right? There were a few key plays last year where the defense just kind of ran out of gas and was out of position a little bit. And we'll talk about the playoff game last year against Washington, against a very good Washington team and Michael Penix. The defense at the end of the day, while they played a good game, there were just a few key mistakes that cost them. And this year, that hasn't been the case with the Texas defense. They've really stepped up, they've really developed, and they're really playing smart, hard football right now, which is awesome to see. All right, so let's talk real quickly about that third phase of the game, kind of the thorn in Texas's side this year. Perhaps we're not talking about it as much as we should. I think here on Fire the Cannon, we've had several conversations about this. Oh, special teams.
More people are starting to talk about the struggles on special teams.
Yeah, well, you heard it here.
Some improvement on the returns this week, I have to say. Golden and Bolden, some improvement on the returns, but the punting, still the numbers look better. 4 for 145 on the punts, but it just feels again like we're not getting set up all the time and using it as an advantage and a weapon like it's been in the years past. The last few years, special teams have been absolutely a weapon. They don't feel like a weapon, but there were good moments this week.
Sure. No, I would agree with that. Now, there has been some improvement in certain areas, but it's not consistent quite yet. I think for Texas, really, to round out the game, special teams has got to improve. Those punts have got to get better. I don't disagree. Like, there have been a few times where we've seen Kern go back and punt, and actually I think it was Ratliff this time as well.
No, it was Kern that punted this week. They've been going back.
Going back and forth, right, between the two.
Yeah.
So we've seen a couple plays where, the ball will get a few good punts in, but we start off with really terrible punts. It's just that consistency hasn't been there with Texas. And something I did want to point out against this game, in the game against Vanderbilt, the field position battle has been a problem for Texas here the past few games, and the special teams really are playing into that. Now, Texas, in my opinion, this is me. This is how I look at it, and I have these gut reactions in the game. Rocky, tell me I'm off my rocker. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm looking at this all wrong. But I feel like one of Texas's problems when it comes to receiving is that they're misgauging consistently how deep the ball is going to go. It feels a lot like Bolden specifically, and sometimes Golden too, are just playing too shallow, and more often than not are having to backpedal like crazy, or even run back and catch a punt behind their shoulder and then turning around. To me, those kind of small things are costing Texas, and Texas is losing that ability to really hit hard, catch the ball, and go. You're using time. You're giving the opposing team more time to come down and figure out where you are and how to stop you. That to me is something that's been kind of frustrating. I'd like to see a little bit, if you've seen that the punter or the kicker you're going up against has a leg, back off, for God's sakes. Like, let's figure that out a little bit.
We saw Bolden back up at one point. He did take a step back, and
it was an adjustment in the game. Yeah,
look further back, so that's good. They did have a fantastic punter. Vanderbilt did, and they did have to adjust. It is scary when he turns to catch it, like twisting and turning, but he catches it. He catches it.
It was credit.
And he has confidence, and he catches it. And you know what? That's 99% of the battle is to catch it, and he does it. Yeah. I worry, like you're worried about the catch. I'm worried about a block punt is coming. They are millimeters of getting these punts off, both punters. I don't know if it's the protection. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's delayed, why the punter is being delayed. But there are so many times they've gone like, it thought it was a block, And unfortunately, other teams are seeing it. You know, if you can just get a split second faster, Arkansas will be faster, Florida will be faster, A&M will be faster. A block punt changes the game, especially on the road. The momentum shifts huge if you give them that kind of field position on the road, that kind of energy. Something has to be done because I'm terrified that block punt is coming in the worst time.
Yeah.
So hopefully they see that too.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like we've talked about, field position is absolutely key in these games, and Texas has not been doing a great job winning that field position battle. So I agree, special teams has to improve there, has to start getting some positive yardage for Texas in that field position battle. But again, I think something that we're seeing too, that it's kind of this unfortunate perfect storm of field position, is the turnovers have been an issue. The penalties are a massive issue for Texas. When you're getting those penalties on key drives, it's killing plays or allowing the other team to continue to keep going when they would have gotten a stop. Or again, you're just allowing the team to go deeper into Texas territory, and that puts our punters, our kickers, who haven't had the best kicks recently, just putting them in a worse position. So not only does special teams need to clean it up, but the team has to play cleaner ball, keep those mistakes to a minimal. And also they've got to clean up the penalties to help out with that field position battle. So I agree that's something Texas really, really needs to work on. So, all right, before we jump into a quick college football recap, what do you think are the key things that Texas needs to focus on and really work on in this bye week?
Well, let's hear from Sark first, because he had a good idea of what all they need to be working on, and then we'll give our thoughts. One sec.
Recovery this week is going to look a little bit different. There's some guys that are recovering from physical ailments that we need to get them back from. There's some guys that maybe got to get their mental health space, kind of maybe realigned with all that a season can put on them, and make sure we have resources for them that way. There's other guys that maybe just need some physical rest. And so where that lands on each guy is a little bit different. We just want to make sure our players know, Quinn included, that all of those resources are here for them to get that done, whatever it makes them feel like. When we come back next Monday, their battery's charged up as close to 100%. They feel as good as they can feel for this kind of 4-game stretch that we have coming up.
All right. So everyone needs something a little different, right? Some people need physical rest. Some people need mental rest. Some people need, recovery, active recovery. Everyone needs different things, right? So everyone's different. So hopefully, I know they're really great at communicating and evaluating each person's needs. And I feel like the team really feels empowered to speak up to what they need. So we'll just, trust the staff and the team, and there they go.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the biggest thing for me that obviously the coaches know what the team needs. They know what each individual needs, and they're going to focus on that. But I think something overall as a team that they've got to focus on is just cleaning it up, like we've talked about throughout this whole episode. Just get those penalties to a minimum, communicate a little bit better, and cleaning up just the little things where Texas is hurting themselves versus the other teams hurting them. So,
right.
All right. Well, let's just do a quick college football recap. Some exciting games happened, changed the landscape of college football a little bit. The rankings switched up a bit. Let's dive into that now, Rocky.
All right. So here is the new AP top 25. I'll turn that crazy sound down. Oregon, still number 1, right? Georgia, number 2. I'm not sure why Penn State, they looked rough, but they're still undefeated. So they're number 3, Ohio State. And then Texas dropped to number 6 for winning a top 25 on the road. So I don't know. Tennessee still in there, even though they have an ugly loss on the road. Notre Dame has an ugly loss, but you know what? They're ahead of undefeated teams, so they must still look good to somebody. Aggies finally hit the top 10. Good for them. They're still winning. And here's the rest of the list here. There are now only 8 undefeated teams, and that's Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Miami, Army. They had the week off. Navy got that butt kicking. BYU, Pitt, and Indiana are your undefeateds, if you can believe that list. That's crazy.
Definitely crazy. Look, I think Penn State is another one where they're getting credit. The Big Ten is no joke. It's a serious conference, and to come out of that this far in the season unscathed, with no losses, I think is why you're seeing them up so high. Definitely a little frustrating as a Texas fan to see Texas drop after a ranked win. That being said, I don't think anybody's going to look at the performance of Texas in this past game and think that be absolutely blown away. There weren't any mind-blowing plays. There weren't any moments where you go, damn, Texas looks completely unbeatable, right? So I can understand the drop a little bit. Staying in the top 10, staying within that 6 range, I think feels about right for Texas. Again, Texas has a lot of things to clean up. Get some of that mentality back in there, clean up those penalties, and I think we'll be just fine. Once again, Texas still in control of their destiny. Just win out, keep improving as we go. So, were there any games that caught you off guard? Let's just go over a couple of the top matchups. Any of those that jumped out at you as a surprise?
No, Oregon dominating number 20 Illinois. I mean, they were at home, so that's good. Penn State struggled early with Wisconsin, and then we thought maybe upset City. Nope, they pulled away. You were watching the Nebraska-Ohio State score, and Penn State gets Ohio State this week, so that's going to settle 3 versus 4, or 2 versus 3, however they have them right now. Nebraska, you said, oh, Nebraska could upset Ohio State, and then Ohio State comes back because that's what they do. Miami dominated Florida State like we picked. Okay, but let's talk about that Aggie LSU game. That was the biggest game of the weekend as far as in the SEC, determining first place in the SEC, which now the Aggies have. But it wasn't LSU didn't come in. LSU we said was going to have the better quarterback coming in, and they did because Connor Weigman got pulled.
Right.
But Marcel Reed was ready to go and led the Aggies back. LSU was up 10-0 and lost.
Right. Yeah. Look, credit to the Aggies. They are certainly looking like a more rounded club than I anticipated. I think a lot of people saw coming in Elko's first year. So again, credit where it's due. Elko's come in and really infused this team with a lot of excitement. Obviously, the talent was there on A&M. It was just a matter of organizing it and getting them to do the right things. So I'll say this: A&M is a dangerous team right now. They are a scary team, and they're not somebody that I am ready to go up against. I think Texas will be when we get there, but I'm glad we're not playing them next week. A&M looks like an absolute fire breather right now, which is a crazy thing to say. And again, I think a lot of that is pulling Connor Weigman for Reed, putting him in. That was something we talked about at the beginning of the season. Reed just seems to have that ability to fire up the team. Now, we know that earlier on when A&M pulled Weigman and put Reed in and then reinstated Weigman played like a man with his hair on fire. He was there, so you understand why they're sticking with Weigman for the starts at least, because he does have his moments where he flashes and he can be a really, really good quarterback. But at the end of the day, I think what is working best for A&M is that mobile quarterback, and Reed really has the ability to use his legs and still make you pay with the passes. So it'll be interesting to see how A&M and how Elko move forward. Are they going to stick with Reed as their starter moving forward, or is this going to be more of a 2-quarterback system, which has its own problems as you move forward? But it's working. It's working.
Yeah, Elko was asked about that, and he said no comment yet on which quarterback he's going to go with. So
he hasn't decided.
Controversy yet. There, I'm sure.
Sure, yeah. Of course. All right. Well, again, A&M just really rolling, credit where it's due, as much as it hurts my little burnt orange heart to say. The Aggies are looking like the team to beat right now. They are looking really tough, and they're peaking at the right time as they go on. Now, will that Aggie roller coaster that we see every season come in where expectations are high, everything's building, the team looks great, and then all of a sudden they fall off later in the year? I don't know. It looks like A&M might be built to last this time. So, talking about that, building up to the last game of the season, not to look too far ahead for Texas, but that game at Kyle Field currently is the most expensive game in college football to try to get that ticket. Some of the tickets reaching as high as $5,000-$6,000 in the lower level. But just to get into the game right now, it's looking like you're going to be paying about $800 for a ticket before fees, and those fees are running $400 each. So,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
hopefully you've got a kidney to sell if you planned on going to that game. It's going to be a hot ticket and tough to get into for sure. Now, let's talk the opposite of a hot ticket. Oklahoma struggling yet again. Perhaps not so much fan enthusiasm for the Oklahoma Sooners this year. Oklahoma went up against Ole Miss, number 18 Ole Miss, and that game ended up Oklahoma 14, Ole Miss 26. Any surprises in that game for you, Rocky?
No, sounds about right. Ole Miss has a lot on tape. Oklahoma has enough defense to hold them to 26 in at Ole Miss. I'm surprised Oklahoma was able to get 2 touchdowns. They did. Yeah, I mean, this Venables experiment is feeling more and more rough for Oklahoma. So we'll see what he's not going to be fired this year, but wonder how many more scapegoats he's going to let go, and when it's his roster mismanagement, that's to be the problem.
So I'll pose you with that question. Our friend Goes to Texas Football at 40 Acre Vibes on Twitter posed the question: if you were Oklahoma, would you pull the plug on Brent Venables, or would you give him more time? Sounds like you're in the camp of give him a little more time.
No, I'm saying they will give him more time.
What would you do if you're Oklahoma?
Because who are you going to go get? Might as well ride it out at least one more year, because who are you going to go get?
Sure. Yeah.
Look, and with the portal, you're supposed to be a blue blood. You're supposed to have some NIL money. You should be able to fix enough pieces in the portal on the off season. So if he does all that and still can't manage his roster, then you have huge question marks.
Yeah, I agree with that. In today's day and age, it seems like there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions when it comes to coaching calls and who's going to be at the top. I mean, if we recall, just a couple of years ago, there were plenty of Texas fans out there that were calling for Coach Sarkisian's head after the first season, and certainly after the second season, there was still some fussing about it. I think if I'm Oklahoma, look, I think you have to give him at least one more year. As a Texas fan, I'm delighted about that. Keep him on, extend him as long as you absolutely want to.
Yeah, I love him there. I would keep him.
He's my favorite OU coach, but look, I've said this multiple times. I think that Venables is a great defensive coordinator. But when it comes to having all of the skills to be that CEO head coach that you have to be at this kind of level, I'm just not convinced that he is equipped with all of those skills right now. And I'm not sure that that's something that he's going to develop at Oklahoma in any amount of time. You're right, though. They fired the offensive coordinator in Luttrell. I think that was more of a scapegoat situation, because OU's problems are deeper than just a single coach at offensive coordinator. Sometimes you can see when you fire a problematic assistant that you get kind of a spark from the team. That did not happen against Ole Miss. So, yeah, I think OU's problems are deeper than just one assistant coach. But, for sake of fairness, and to your point, who are you going to replace Venables with? I think that the coaching pool is kind of tough right now. So, you're probably going to give him.
Yeah, the best coaches are set where they are, and Oklahoma is really not in a position to pull anybody right now.
They don't have the money on top of it. Right.
And to buy out Venables on top of that. No, I think they're in it. They'll probably be investing in NIL a little bit to try and get some portal spots.
Absolutely.
All right. So Alabama only dropped to number 15, even though they've had 2 bad losses. So they handled Missouri no problem. Missouri's has been a fraud, could score 0 points against Alabama. Southern Miss, SMU went against Duke. The game went to overtime, and SMU survived. Poor Malik Murphy. But Malik Murphy gets Miami this week, so let's see what they can do. And Aggies go to South Carolina. We're going to talk about all these games. So South Carolina and Duke have opportunities to do something really great for the rest of the world. And then we both talked about Notre Dame, Navy. I thought Navy would have some pulse, but we both said the winning streak was ending. I said Notre Dame would have some pulse and hang in there. You said Notre Dame would pull away, and I'm sorry, Navy. Yeah, you said Notre Dame would pull away. They did. They whooped up on Navy. It was close for a while until it was not. So Navy, sorry, your undefeated streak is over. Army though is still undefeated, but they had a bye.
Yeah,
so that helps you stay undefeated when you have a bye.
Yeah, it's hard to lose on the bye week for sure. So, All right. Well, that wraps up everything. Again, we appreciate y'all being here. We'll talk a little bit more on our live show this upcoming Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. Central. We'd love for y'all to join us. Be sure to like and subscribe. Again, on YouTube, we are Fire the Cannon Podcast. On Instagram and on Twitter, we are at Fire the Cannon and the number 1. We appreciate you being here, y'all. As always, I'm Megan.
I'm Rocky, but I want to say one thing before we wrap up. Texas soccer plays tonight in the SEC championship tournament. Mississippi State women won the series tournament, but our women play. They are the 3 seed, not bad. They play at 2 p.m. today on the SEC network, the girls soccer. So good luck to them. The women's soccer, good luck to them.
Tune in on a Tuesday. All right, I love it. So appreciate that shout out, Rocky, at the very end to Texas women's soccer. Again, hook 'em horns, keep it up, keep up that winning streak, Texas. So as always, again, we'll see y'all again live on Thursday. As always, I'm Megan.
I'm Rocky.
And we are Fire the Cannon. Hook 'em, y'all.